Welcome to Dream Chaser Radio.
Welcome back. It's the world famous Dream Chaser Show. I'm your host, Will Lane. If this is your first time tuning in, the Dream Chaser Show is motivational conversation for regular people doing big things. So it's all about living big and dreaming big. With that being said, I got a question. Let's say you work for a major accounting firm in, I don't know, New York City. You're making great money. CEO comes to you and wants to give you a promotion. Promotion to be the second guy in charge at the company. So we're not just talking about fries to the register here. We're talking about a big promotion. You're already making great money, but the money's about to get ridiculous. So ridiculous salary, huge yearly bonus, corporate card spending account, stock options. We're talking about the works, all the perks here. But in the back of your mind, you're thinking, all right, it's going to be a lot of work. It's going to require me to work, 80 hours a week. That friends and family time, forget about it. You'll be working 80 hours a week. You're really not the corporate type. I mean, you do a good job at acting, but you're really not the corporate type. 50 hours a week, you can get by. 80 hours a week, that's your life. It's going to require you to live it. What do? Do you take the promotion? Or do you walk away from it all and pursue your dream of traveling around the world and doing what's really important to you? What do you do? Well, if you're my guest today, you actually choose the latter. I want to welcome to the show Mr. A.J Leon. AJ, welcome to the show. I appreciate you coming. Let's start out just telling us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is AJ. I write online at a site called pursuitoferything.com. I'm currently on a trip to travel around the entire world over land and sea in 1,080 days. And 5 years ago, I was certainly not that. I was working a job that I absolutely despised in Manhattan in finance, and until one day, which was 3 days before my wedding on December 31st, 2007, when it finally occurred to me that I had been duped into living some other dude's life, and that if I didn't leave, I was up for a big promotion that would have landed me probably about second in the company that I was working at, a fund in New York. And if I knew, as a matter of fact, man, if I would have accepted it, I would have been that guy for the rest of my life. So I walked away from the only professional life I had ever known, and started deciding to carve my own path instead.
That's crazy, man. Tell me, and I imagine that, most likely people that are drawn to this podcast are probably feeling the same way. They're in a job that they're really not satisfied in. You're looking across the hallway, and this guy's going to the bathroom every 20 minutes, and he looks like a zombie. Everybody can't wait until Friday at happy hour. Let me ask you, at what point did you say, you know what, this is the end? I know you said it was when you got a promotion, but what is it exactly that caused you to say, you know what, I'm going to walk away from everything and I'm just going to jump off the cliff?
I mean, it's difficult to, well, I guess it's two things. First of all, there wasn't like one moment where it occurred to me that I hated what I was doing. I always knew that I didn't want to do what I was doing, but I felt like I had no other choice. I did what everybody does. You go to university, you get as great a grade as you can possibly get. Out of college, particularly if you're in finance or in that business world, what do? You take the biggest job offer from the largest firm offering the most money. And that is the barometer by which you judge your life, if we're honest, because then you look at opportunities based on the revenue that you're going to get, and you then stay somewhere for 2 years and make a vertical leap somewhere else where you'll have incrementally more responsibility, but probably significantly more revenue. And I had done that successfully, but I never wanted any of it. I mean, even when I had just graduated, I never wanted it. I just felt like there was no other choice. This is just what you do. And when I was in finance, when it led up to that day, I mean, that was 3 days, 72 hours before I was supposed to get married. And I had just been offered this promotion where I would have been second to the CEO of this company in terms of level. So in terms of my salary, I was already making good money. It would have been exponentially more money, much higher bonus. You know, Manhattan bonuses are just crazy. Sometimes more than your salary. It would have put me in an income bracket that money is kind of a tricky thing, because the more money you make, the harder it is to walk away, you know? And sometimes you think, oh, well, let me make more money and then I'll save and then I'll start my own thing someday. And usually it doesn't work out that way, because it's just too hard to walk away from it at some point. You know, it's a sneaky son of a bitch that way. And I knew, it occurred to me that, you know, here I am, I'm about to get married, so that's responsibility in your life, and I'm about to take this promotion. I would have never walked away. I wouldn't have had the courage. I wouldn't have had the strength, the wherewithal to ever walk away. So I was staring down the pike at a life that I had already lived a few years that I didn't want to live, right? And I was staring down the pike and looking at myself as a 62-year-old dude just retiring, finally starting to decide to live the life that he actually always wanted. And the fear that struck me at that moment, that I was crossing this point of no return, was greater than the fear of how am I going to pay rent next month. And that was the moment where I realized, if I don't leave right now, I am going to be this guy for the rest of my life. And that was terrifying. So I did the only thing that I could do, which was grab my shit and just walk out the door and never turn back.
Now, how old are you at this point?
I'm 30.
Okay, and you were how long ago when you walked away?
That was, oh Lord, 4.5 years ago. 5 years ago. Yeah.
And so, how long did this decision process take? Was this you know, just woke up in the morning and said, you know what, I'm going to turn in my resignation, or was it over a period of weeks, days?
I mean, I had always dreamed of leaving. I had never thought that it was actually going to be possible. On this day, it wasn't waking up in the morning. It was basically around noon. I had a meeting with my boss, which, you know, he talked about this promotion. He pushed it on. He kind of said, hey, you're going to get promoted, and this is going to do. I already knew that it was coming down, but then he said it was going to kick in 48 hours. Aren't you so happy? Blah, blah, blah. Talked about my future in the company and all that. And then I had this lunch period where, you know, I just went down and grabbed some lunch, and I sat there, and then I came back up to my office, and I was just looking out the window. You know, I had a really nice corner office, and I'm just staring out on the Manhattan skyline, and I just started crying, you know. I mean, tears started rolling down my face, because I felt like I was trapped, like my life had gotten away from me somehow, and there's no way I could get it back, you know. And I'm just explaining the feelings I had this meeting, and all of a sudden I just saw my life drifting away, you know, to this life that I never wanted. And I was in it. Now it's like I was just going to go to these uncharted waters that I'd never come back from. And it was just petrifying, you know. So I sat there probably for about 30, 45 minutes by myself, really agonizing over this. And then it just struck me in a moment, you know, it just struck me like, you got to go, man. You know, you got to walk out right. And then I was like, oh my God, I gotta leave. I gotta leave right now, you know, because I'm gonna fucking take this promotion, and I'm never gonna be able to walk away. You know, I'm gonna be a married guy. You know, I'm just never gonna be able to walk away. So I took off.
So at this point, is there anything in the bank significant? You know, do you have a plan B? I think that's probably going to be the question on everyone's mind.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I wish I was a smarter man than that, and I never dole this out as like life planning advice. I never tell anybody, hey, take me as an example, because it certainly could have gone the other way. I had no plan B, because that happened very, very quickly for me. And sadly, and again, this is just stupid, but a lot of guys in my field and in my world in Manhattan, it was like the same thing. You spend money at the rate at which you make it, because you feel like you're meant to. You know, you just feel like the money's always going to be there. So there was never any significant savings or anything. And I had just paid for my wedding and our honeymoon. We went to Africa, this 5-country African, really expensive thing. And I bought my wife this beautiful ring. So all of the savings that I had emptied it in the weeks coming to this. So I had $2,000, I believe, more or less savings at the time, which was, enough for, almost 1 month's rent. So no, I didn't have, there was no plan B. There was nothing, and it sounds crazy, and it is crazy, and that's why I don't, I certainly don't promote that as a life plan. But for me, at that time, and I suspect for some other, for a small subset of people, that, when you see yourself driving off a cliff, the only thing that matters, the collateral damage of the fall of you jumping out of the car is, and you breaking your arm or your leg or whatever, is not nearly as terrifying as you flying off the cliff, right? You do what you have to do to survive. And for me, that's the equivalent. Like I have reached that point of no return. Somebody listening to this podcast is hopefully much more prudent than I. They would see that coming down much earlier, and you can start making those plans. I know people that they're brilliant. They do what my friend Pam Flynn calls creative side hustle. So a little business that you start working on in the off hours. Once you get off of work and you work on that for a year or two, test the market, and then you jump off, and it's much more smooth than what I did.
So 3 days before you're about to get married, what does your wife say? Because a lot of guys would look at that as like, now I can't quit,
Yeah, of course, bro. And that came into my thought process. A lot of me thought once I'm married, I certainly can never quit, because there was a level, once you get married, there's that level of responsibility and all that. That all came in my mind as well. It was during that agonizing 45 minutes I was in my office. My wife, I call as soon as I hit down. I grabbed my shit, walked to the elevator, went down, hit the street of Manhattan, and for the first time since I was a kid, I realized that I was free. And I just had this moment where, it was very like cinematic. I threw my hands up in the air on the street corner in New York, and I was just like, I'm free. I just knew that I was free. And I immediately called my wife, and I told Melissa, listen, I know this is going to come as a shock, but I just quit. And she said, and I'll never forget, her response was, she was quiet, and she was like, oh, thank God. And her response was something to the effect of, I'm so glad that you're back. That's what she said. I'm so glad I have my AJ back. And she was like, I'd rather live with you, the real you, under the Brooklyn Bridge than the guy you've been the last few years. Because I was only, my wife and I have been together, we've been through the woods together, we've been together since we were kids. So she knew me when I was the real me. And before I had sold myself to a system and little pieces of myself had faded away throughout that, and so she was just happy to have me back in a way, which was great. The rest of my family thought I was fucking nuts, they thought I was crazy, but she was with me. She was the one and only one.
So tell us about what you're doing now.
Yeah, right now I run a company called Misfit Incorporated, and my wife and I run it together. We have a business partner and 7 total in the company with employees and stuff. We do a lot of different things. We do design. We're a design agency, and then we launch a lot of our own products. We just launched a magazine a couple months ago. I'm publishing a book, so we're publishing our own book. And I'm also on a trip to travel around the world in 1,080 days. So we do quite a few little things.
Now, a lot of the stuff that you're doing with Misfit, was that a skill that you already had prior to leaving?
When I left my job, the funny thing is, when I left my job, I immediately started to, I thought the problem was I just needed to be an entrepreneur, and I needed to be out of an office, and I needed to be free. So when you think that that is the problem, then the immediate solution is, well, I'll just set up any business, and I'll just have it, and if I can run it on my own, then I'll be happy. And so I started doing what I had previously done, much of which was management consulting, due diligence, blah blah blah. So I started creating this management, A.J Leon like management consulting business, and it wasn't 60 days into that process where I realized, wait a second, I'm creating the same prison here, except this time I'm on the inside. It's locked from the inside, and I'm holding the key. And that was the real wake-up call where I realized, it's not just about being an entrepreneur, being out of an office. It's about finding out who you are, what you represent on this planet, what your one and only life is supposed to be about. And that's a much bigger question than just figuring out the vicissitudes of how to run a profitable business, which many people can do. So I went through a period of self-discovery where I started actually writing a lot for the first time in a long time. And one of the things that I did was write what I wanted my life to look like in just 2 years. If I had my ideal life, what would I do? And, I wanted to travel around the world. I wanted to run a web-based company. I wanted to have a company that had headquarters. I wanted to give 20% of my time to social and humanitarian projects. I wanted to work together with my wife. So all these things that I jotted down ended up being the archetype of what Misfit Incorporated, our company today, became, And some of that involved me learning new skills. I'm a designer. I design everything we put out there on the web. I never touched Photoshop in my life. I'm a finance guy through and through. That's my education. I picked up new skills, made partnerships with people that had, we brought a partner that ended up, he's now our lead developer, being now at Misfit, so we did a lot of things different. It's like a 180 turnaround for what my life used to be like.
Now, you also have a book.
Yeah, I have a book that's coming out now because our Kickstarter works, so thank God. 18 months ago, I actually had a book deal from a very large publisher, and it was kind of the same scenario. Like they approached me to write a book, and I was like, oh, cool. It wasn't really, it wasn't my book. It wasn't something that I truly wanted to. The book that I had in my mind that I would always publish as my first book, which was this collection of essays that I'm working on now. It was something that they approached me to write. I thought, okay, cool, yeah, absolutely. And I fretted over it for a little bit because I didn't actually want to write that book, but I signed the contract anyway because, who the hell walks away from a book deal?
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't walk away from a book deal. Just like you don't walk away from a promotion. And so I made almost with that decision, I made the same mistake that I had made so many years before. Just doing what you do because that's what you do, as opposed to sitting back and saying, okay, if I don't want this, then why would I do that? Irrespective of money and fame and everything else, why would I do it if it's not me? So about 6 months into the process, it was really weighing heavy on me because these are the things that I talk about. So I was the greatest hypocrite of all, and then I called the publisher and I said, you know what, I can't do this. This is not me. I don't care about this book. It's not a book I want to write. It's never a book I want to write. I apologize. It wasn't them. It was me. And to return the money, and I felt like an asshole, and I just felt like, I don't know. I felt terrible, that I had even gone down that route. But I felt good that I finally I said, you know what, took a stand and said, I'm not going to do this if it doesn't represent me or him. So, you fast forward 18 months, and I thought to myself, it occurred to me about 60 days ago that, if I have this work that I want to produce, and I have people, thousands of people that stop by Pursuit of Everything every month to read my work, and we have a tribe there, what if I could approach that tribe to the same financial degree that the publisher offered me in advance? So that was $10,000. So I launched a Kickstarter. So if I can raise $10,000 from my tribe, my people, to produce this work, then that's, and I can make it work in terms of printing books for that and all that, and I can make the figures work, then why not? Why not do it myself? I just choose me instead of trying to go to another publisher. So that's what we did. And I was obviously nervous. Kickstarter is a scary thing because it could be a very public failure. You could put $10,000 is a lot of money. You could put $10,000 up there and have 400 pledged, and at the end of 30 days, just look like an idiot in a very public sense. But I was surprised, within 5 hours, it was fully funded. And within 24, it was double funded. And 3 days later, it was almost $30,000. So, which is great. And I hope it'll serve as an example to other writers. There's a lot of great writers I know out there that are unpublished. And I hope it'll serve as an example to say, you know what, choose yourself. We don't have to wait. This isn't kickball. We don't have to wait in a fucking line for people to point us out. We have work. We have a tribe of people who support our work, our creative work. Then, we can make stuff for them. And I've got nothing against the publishing industry. I think there's a lot of my friends that write great books. The book that I was hired, that I had a contract to write, was not going to be a great book. It was going to be a very average book, and I knew it. So, yeah, that's a little bit about that story.
One of the things I found interesting on your blog, it was a statement that you made on your blog, and it said, "Do you want to know one of the great unsung characteristics in life? It's the ability to thrive when you don't know how the story is going to end." What does that mean to you personally, with everything that you've done, you've accomplished, things you've walked away from? What does that statement mean to you personally?
I think for me personally, I feel like life is meant to be. Life is a narrative, and you are the protagonist in your very own novel, and I want my life to be something that I would want to sit down and read, I want to be in the midst of a grand adventure, and I think most people do as well. And the trouble is, when you're in the midst of a grand adventure, things go wrong, and usually uncertainty is the binding factor that creates these moments of excitement. It's the not knowing. If you look at Lord of the Rings, if Frodo just prances into Mordor and with butterflies whipping around his head and just flicks the ring into Mount Doom, no one would give a shit. No one would care about the story. And I think that's true about when you're looking at your own life, and your own life is a narrative. So I think that for your own life. And this is not true of everybody, but I think it's true of many, many people out there. We are, the system or society tries to coax us into security and safety. And that sometimes comes in the form of well-intentioned family members and teachers and peers and colleagues. But the problem is that usually that leads to a prescribed life. It leads to something that is already, you can already see the end of it, as opposed to living a life of excitement. Like as an entrepreneur, as we're talking about on the show, as an entrepreneur, whatever venture you're starting, you don't know how that's going to end. You have no idea. But at the end, you learn more about yourself through that process of going through that uncertainty as a character in any novel, just going through your own character. That's kind of what I meant by that. I don't know if that makes any sense. But.
Oh, it did. So would you say that you place very little value on security?
I would say that for the most part, I try to push myself into uncomfortable settings. I try to push myself as much as I can into zones of discomfort for me personally. Going on this journey around the world, for instance, is not like, there's easier ways to travel, and I know because I've done them. This is a great adventure, and things could sincerely go wrong. I mean, I'm driving around, bad things could happen for sure, but that is part of my story, and that's what makes it exciting and worth doing. So I think that valuing security and safety above all things, if that's what then you're going to be effectively, if you're completely secure and completely safe, then what are you doing? You're hiding, you know? I mean, you're hiding. And I don't think any of us want to spend our one and only life hiding. And that's, you know, obviously you try to, you know, from a company perspective, we try to generate, you know, stay profitable but we always venture out into new things. You know, we just launched a print magazine, you know, 4 months ago. That's absurd. You know, maybe it's absurd, but we thought, you know what, this is great. It'll be an artifact. I think, you know, people would appreciate this creative art magazine we're putting out there. We just put it out there into the world, and it was a risk, and it could have blown up in our face. And if it did, that's fine. We would have walked away, and at least we would have learned from something from that experience, as opposed to never trying in the first place. And I guess that's what I think.
Let me ask you, what is your philosophy with money? There's a financial risk to doing a lot of this.
Sure.
What is your philosophy around money? Does it mean anything to you, or is it kind of just you know, what are your thoughts on that?
I think money is it's a tricky thing, because you know we've created this thing that we're beholden to, and I think a lot of times in life a lot of things in my previous life that I considered needs, I now understand as one. You know, they're not. I don't need a third car. I don't need a house in the Hamptons, right? But so when you start looking at all those things that you think that you need, when you pare them down to the things that you look at them, they're actually only things that you want, based on probably marketing messages, the things that you think that you should want. And when you pare that down, a lot of people could travel the world that aren't currently traveling the world, but want to travel the world if they looked at their life from a different perspective. And a lot of that perspective has to do with money and what they use their money on. For me personally, money and profitability is not the central reason why I embark on something, you know. And even in our company, like I don't look at an opportunity and just look at profitability and say, okay, how much money is that going to generate? But, okay, yeah, we'll do it if it's the X number. There's a lot of various factors. I mean, we do, you know, we 20% of our time at Mitzvah we spend on humanitarian projects or social justice projects. That brings in no revenue. But we don't. So I mean, you're spending time and money effectively by paying staff and everything to work on these projects. It doesn't generate revenue, but there's another output where the world has changed. You know, where you're making a difference, you're making a mark, and this world is slightly different because we were in it, and that is something that matters to us more than the money that we would have spent working on for-profit clients with that 20%. So again, a bit. You know, I don't know if that makes perfect sense.
No, I get it.
That is, you know, yeah. I mean, that's the way I look at it. That's money in general, and how I make decisions with regard to it.
Would you say that you have more confidence in your ability to create money than you did when you were in corporate? Because one thing I find is that, you know, corporate, it's like you kind of wait until the money is given to you, whereas, you know, as an entrepreneur, you have to learn how to create it. Do you have more confidence in your ability to, you know, wipe out and then come back?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, and that happens the more you try. You know, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I personally have failed at all types of ideas you put out there, and it just doesn't work. And then you learn from that. You know, you learn from failures, not from successes. You know, you learn from the things that don't work out. So, as an entrepreneur, like more and more seasoned entrepreneurs, they're usually the people who have a lot of losses under their belt. You know, the people who have tried lots of things that just didn't work out, and then through the process of elimination, they figure out things that can, and then that gives you confidence. Because now you're looking at the landscape with this wisdom of saying, okay, I've done this. I know that that'll probably work out that way. Okay, let me try this. And it's certainly, you know, it's certainly different from, you know, my former days where I was pushing paper money around. And then from a personal perspective, you're just waiting to collect money. You know, you're just waiting for money to be placed in your bank account, as opposed to having to connect a bunch of dots to create an idea that would hopefully, you know, generate revenue.
And it's kind of, you know, to echo what you were saying about you learn the most from failure. And I think a lot of failures actually take away the sting of failure, which makes you, you know, be that much more aggressive.
And I think, I mean, depending on how you grew up and, you know, how thick your skin is and all that, you may, I mean, I still deal with fear all the time. You know, when we launched a Kickstarter, I sincerely, in my heart of hearts, Will, I thought, wow, as soon as I hit the launch button, I immediately regretted it. I was like, God, I am going to be the greatest fool of all. I'm going to be sitting here in 30 days. No one's going to support it, and I'm going to look like an idiot. And that fear, like that really, that enveloped me. You know, I was sincerely scared. And I still get that fear today. We started this journey. I felt the same thing. I thought, oh my God, something's going to go wrong, and what do you do? And what am I going to do with this? If X happens or Y, and you let your mind go to the worst possible scenarios. And I feel like, for at least me personally, and I think there's probably other people out there like me as well, you're always going to deal with that. You know, you're always, as long as you're trying new things and charting new waters and sailing further away from shore, you know, as soon as the shore is off of the horizon and now it's just you alone out there, you're going to be scared and you're going to fear failure and catastrophe and all that. But usually, when you feel that fear, you have to know you're on the right path. You're pressing into something there. You know, you're pressing into something that probably matters. Because the things that don't matter, you're not necessarily scared to try, you know? So.
That's big. What's the hardest thing you think that's been, you know, what's the hardest thing about all this? Everything that you've done, what's been the hardest thing?
The hardest thing, I think, is and will always be remaining true to your ideals. You know, there was a time 2.5 years ago where we were offered to be purchased. You know, Misfit was offered to be purchased as a design agency, and that's like, and not that we would have ever done it, but it was just like, wow, somebody's presenting you with money and security and all that, and that's something that we could, but it's not us. It's not what Misfit's for. You know, the book deal as well that I had 18 months ago, you know, that was a decision, and I made the wrong decision, right? I took it. I signed a contract on something that wasn't me. I made the wrong call, and the fear is, I mean, I think the greatest struggle is, and will always be for the rest of your life, if you're truly, truly living the life that you're supposed to live, is remaining true to that. You know, it's Polonius' advice to Laertes before he heads off to France. You know, that above all, as I know itself be true, and that is, well, I think what we all as humans, we all struggle with to some degree or another. And the truer you're living, you know, to your actual self, what you're supposed to be doing, I think there's more tension out there in the world to try to get you to crawl back. You know, at least in my case.
You sound like somebody who's done a lot of personal development. Are you heavy into reading and personal development?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know specifically. I mean, it depends what you mean by personal development. I read a lot. I mean, I read voraciously. So yeah, definitely. I think. I mean, I've dealt with a lot of things at a young age, because of the patterns my life has taken. You know, I happen to be in that finance world, and I've seen a lot at a very young age and climbed the ladder at a very early age. So I got to see all these different levels of it, which then changes your perspective in life when you've been through what I've been through. So, yeah, I'd say sure. And I think travel as well. I mean, we traveled. My wife and I now have traveled to over 50 countries. You know, when you see a lot of the world, and you and I were talking about this before we got on the call, but you know, the more you travel, it's an intoxicating experience. I think primarily because it teaches you. There's something about adventure. Failure and adventure are the greatest teachers in life. You know, because any time when you're in a great adventure, it's always personal development. You know, you're judging yourself based on what you're seeing that's new out there in the world, that you taste, smell, your personal culture, and all that. It evolves you in a way that you can't even describe, you know. So, yeah, for sure.
I know you said you read a lot. What would you say would be the two or three most influential books that have been, you know, life changing for you?
Wow. That's a big question, my friend. In my life, what are the 2 or 3 most influential books?
And it could be one. Maybe it's one that stands out. I don't know.
I would say, I mean, one of the books that it's actually a play. It's Henry V by William Shakespeare, and that is that's probably one of the most influential works that I've read. Another one is An Enemy of the People by Henrik Ibsen. And let's see, a third would probably be A Million Miles in 1,000 Years by Donald Miller. So those are 3 books, 3 different books. That have meant a lot to me in my life, for sure.
Well, I'm surprised. I haven't read any of those either. I got to put those on my list because I'm also a big time reader, which is why I always like to ask that question.
Oh man, yeah, you should check them out for sure.
Let me ask you this: what advice would you give to someone that's preparing to make the jump that you did? What can we learn from maybe your mistakes and your successes?
I think the first piece of advice I give is you can't assume that just because you're out of an office and you're an entrepreneur that you are going to be living the life that you were always destined for. I made that mistake early on, but now I meet lots of entrepreneurs that are stuck in businesses that they don't actually like and living lives that they don't actually want. For instance, if you want to travel the world 80% of the time, not everybody does, but if you wanted to be a nomad and just travel around 80% of the time, you can't start a restaurant, right? It's just not, there's some things that are mutually exclusive. So you have to, the question for me is not anymore, it used to be, but it certainly isn't anymore, what type of business can I create that will generate a healthy enough profit for me to live on my own? The question is, who are you? What do you want your one and only life to be about? More than just this, do you want to travel? Do you want to work on social projects? Do you have a creative side? Are you a painter? Do you make music on the side? Do you like art? I mean, all these types of things that inevitably our portfolio of experiences that create who we are, and those expressions, however we choose to bundle that up. For me, it's Misfit and all the crazy shit that we do. But all of the things that we do are just different expressions of my personality, the things that I love to do. And I would encourage anyone else thinking about leaving their job to think the same and just think, okay, from a holistic perspective, not just money and not just can you create a business that'll generate revenue, but what do you want your life to be about? What do you, 2 years from now, what clearly would you be doing? All of it. And don't just, it could be, I want to be painting a new painting at least once a week while running a profitable marketing firm, while traveling for countries a year, while, and you just kind of list everything that makes you you and use that as a signpost moving forward. Because if you just relegate whatever decision you're making to just something that's going to generate enough money to replace your paycheck, you might be getting into a trap and building a jail cell from the inside like I did.
What does a day look like for AJ Leon? And I mean that specifically in the things that you do that create who you are, whether that be reading, whether it be working out, meditation, whatever the case may be. What are some things that have to be done every day?
My day starts I start at 4:30 in the morning, which is I've turned myself into an early riser. When I was back in the corporate day, I didn't. I just got up right before work and I went to work. But now I've evolved myself. Getting up at 4:30, I do exercise, which is very important to me. It's only 20, 25 minutes, and I have to do it on the road. I call it my prison workout because I can do it anywhere in the world. So I do that, and usually I take a run. Then I sit there and take out my notebook, usually around sunrise, and I just I write anything that comes to my mind. It could be creative writing. Most of it will never be published. It's just for me, what am I learning? What am I feeling right now? What are the things that I'm going through? And I just try to put pen to paper in a very non-metaphorical sense. And then I spend about an hour and a half to 2 reading, which takes me up to about 9:00 or 9:30, and that's when I get to my work. And every day, I usually try to write at least. I use Hemingway as an example. You know, he said you used to write 450 words a day, so I usually try to stick to around that if I can. The act of writing your thoughts, your ideas, your perspective, that I don't know what about it, but it like extracts things from your soul in a way, and then you're confronted with it because then you're looking at it, you know, like it's not just a flippant thought of this or that or whatever. Now you're looking at this essay that you just wrote on whatever, and it has like looking in the mirror, you know, and just for who you really are. So I write 450 words a day, and then from a design perspective, I usually sketch out something that I'm working on as a designer at least once a day, and that gets another side of my creative fluid going. And those things happen every day, no matter where I am in the world. And then, you know, mixed into that is God knows what. It just depends where we are. You know, sometimes we're dealing, you know, 2 weeks ago, my freaking bus that I'm driving around, the transmission blew, and I was dealing with that, and, you know, and all crazy stuff. And, you know, so it just depends what's going on. But that's kind of my system. No matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing, I do that every day.
AJ, I got to tell you, it's been a phenomenal interview. Tell me, what didn't I ask you? What would you like to leave the audience with? Something I didn't ask you, or something that you wanted to say and you didn't get a chance to say?
Man, I think you're such a great interviewer, to be honest, and so thorough that I cannot imagine anything that you didn't ask. You asked me questions I'd never been asked before, so and I had a blast, man. So I hope this is helpful for somebody out there. I know that when I was wanting to leave my former life and living some other guy's life, I remember mining the web for stories like mine right now, which is crazy because it wasn't that long ago. So I can actually remember like searching the web and trying to search for travel bloggers, just search for people who had left successfully and trying to understand how they did it and who they were. And sometimes you contact them. And that was before Twitter and Facebook, so it was harder to do to actually contact them and stuff. But I hope that you know, my story in a small way can be that to somebody that was like me, that's in that position. And, you know, I'm on Twitter, A.J Leon, you know, I'm out there. So if somebody's listening to this and you want to get in touch or you know, you think I can help you out with something or provide you some advice, please let me know. You know, my goal these days, I get up every morning trying to incite as many people to go out there and to live the life they're destined to lead as possible. So, yeah. Thanks for having me on, Will. It's been a blast, man.
Sounds good. And where can the people go to learn more about you and what you're up to?
Sure, yeah. Pursuitofeverything.com is the site that I write on twice a week. You can check me out there. And on Twitter, I'm at A.J Leon. So those two places you find all the rest.
AJ, I wish you the best of luck, man, and just keep doing your thing, man. I'm looking forward to staying posted to the blog and seeing where you're at in the world next. And until the next time we talk, live big, dream big.
Thanks, Will. Appreciate it, man.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. A.J. Leon. Great interview, man. Enjoyed that one a lot. I heard a couple things in that that really made me think. Probably made you think too. One question you got to ask yourself is, are you living your life or are you living some other man's life? Because I believe what most people do is you really look at the guy next to you, you look at the guy on the other side of you, and that's how a lot of us figure out what we're supposed to be doing, whether or not we're getting it right. But the people that do big things are really the ones that kind of put blinders on and blaze their own trail. One thing I thought that was profound that he said was, you know, how as long as you're doing something new, as long as you're trying something new and you're getting out there, you're always going to be afraid. And I thought that was big because a lot of people never make major decisions out of fear. It kind of keeps you stuck in the same place. Like, I'm afraid, so I won't do it. But, you know, with a lot of big gamers, man, they actually use the fear. That's how they figure out whether or not they're alive. So a lot of good points. In closing, I think a good question to ask, and it was one that he mentioned in the interview, was, if your life was a book, would anybody want to read it? Ladies and gentlemen, that's all my time. Hopefully you learned something new or remember something you forgot. Either way, my job is done. Till the next time we talk, live big, dream big. Peace.